Live. Going
Okay.
live. You're
Hello?
live.
Hello? Hello? Testing, testing, testing. Can you guys hear me? Hey guys. Welcome. You guys are on time. Oh, cool, cool, cool. Very cool, very cool, very cool. So, I just collected some memes just to set the mood for this presentation a little bit while we wait for the rest of the people. Where are you guys coming from? Wow, the lag is really slow. Okay, somebody finds it funny. Burnaby, LA, Brazil, the States, Argentina, Marica, Philippines, Vancouver. Cool, cool, cool. Very cool. What's your favorite food? Favorite building? Favorite architect? What's your favorite architect? Philadelphia, Guatemala, from Mexico, California, Puerto Rico, Kenya. Cool. LA. Your teacher introduced me this week and I watched a bunch of your videos. Cool. The case study project. Yeah, no problem. From Miami. Frank Lloyd, of course. Herzog and de Meuron. Love Herzog and de Meuron. Foster. Mm-hmm. Zaha Hadid. Puerto Rico. Is that an architect? Thought, Capsule Tower. Calatrava. Yes, I also love Calatrava. Oh, from Toronto. There's some Calatrava fans here, looks like. Oh, hi. Okay, so I think we can get started now. So I asked you guys a poll, and you guys wanted to talk about school versus work. I thought you guys were gonna want to talk about money, but this is good. And just a bit of housekeeping. As I'm going through the presentation, if you can just say like okay or oh yeah or like LOL, that would help me feel like I'm not talking to myself here. And if you guys can go to the video and give me a thumbs up, that would be awesome. Okay, so we are talking about school versus work. So I'm just going to do a brief talk, and at the end of it, we'll do a Q&A. And you guys can interrupt me if you have any questions. I'll be checking in the chat from time to time, so I'll try to answer your questions as I go. Also, there is like a 25-second delay, I just found out. So I'm not going to be able to respond immediately to your questions. So just please be patient. And I will try to talk fast. By the way, do any of you guys watch the videos at a faster speed? I got a comment on one of my videos from someone saying, watch it at 1.5 speed. You're welcome. I was like, do I talk really slow? Anyways, so a lot of you have said that you've been inspired to be an architect after watching some of the designy videos, but I think you have to enjoy the day-to-day of being an architect, which actually contains a lot of the non-designy stuff like detailing, coordination, code. And so I think you have to enjoy all those things to be successful in architecture. You can be a design architect. That's definitely a role within architecture. But you won't make a lot of money because unless you're like a senior architect, because everyone wants to do design, right? So you sort of need to enjoy the more technical aspects. And just a bit about myself. I always thought of myself as a designer, like the more creative, the left brain type, someone who like loves the conceptual stuff. But last year I became a licensed architect and I left my job at the time. And I sort of sat down and I tried to make a table of like what I like to do, what I don't like to do, what I'm good at, and what I'm not good at. And because I really wanted my next job to be aligned with what I wanted to do. And one of the things that I learned from the little session is that a lot of the things that I hated before when I was starting my journey of like the internship became my favorite things once I started to get good at it and understand it. So an example is construction admin. I hated the paperwork. I thought it was just really boring. But after I got good at it, I really enjoyed. I think before I mostly didn't even know what I was reading like 80% of the time. And so I had to ask questions. I have to like figure things out, and it was just hard. And so I think that's why I really didn't like it. And so, yeah, I think you like what you enjoy now and what you think you enjoy, you actually don't really know until you start working in the field. So today I just want to compare the key differences between school and work. And of course, like on this channel, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to shed some light on what architects actually do on a day-to-day basis. So I'm going to be talking about the difference between school and work through the difference in projects. So we're going to be talking about the scale, the complexity, and I just read a comment saying I get more mesmerizing per minute. Thank you. We will talk about the constraints, and we will talk about the difference in the type of projects between school and work. And through that, we're going to talk about how that affects our lives and our day-to-day as an architect. So in school, you typically do like 1 or 2 or 3 projects per semester. And typically 1 semester is 4 months. And so in those 4 months, you're doing research, programming, concept, design development, presentations. But at work, that time scale is pretty stretched out. And not only that, you're learning about what you're learning about in school only makes up a really, really, really small part of the actual project. So the blue is the design. Can you guys see my mouse? Oh. Anyways, so the blue part is the design portion. And so we do the research, the planning, the concept, the design development, all of that. But on top of that, we have like client meetings, permits, city consultation, public consultation, engineering coordination, construction documents. And construction documents is like a really big part of the project. And yeah, that's really only the beginning part of an architectural project. The construction and the construction admin, that takes up a huge portion of a project's timeline. So in school, your day-to-day or your week-to-week is going to look pretty different. And at work, it could look something like this. Or you could be doing the same thing day in and day out. So depending on, oh man, this is, okay. Yeah, this is supposed to be a GIF. So depending on what kind of project and what kind of firm and like what kind of position you're in, in a lot of cases, the design can be only a really small portion of what you're doing. Oh man, is the GIF not playing? That's sad. Okay, anyways, it was really funny. So if the monotony is something that really scares you, or doing non-designy stuff scares you, don't worry, there are ways to spice up your day-to-day. So you can work on smaller projects, like renovations or residential projects. And I'll talk about this a little bit later. So in smaller projects, the time span is a lot shorter. So you will be doing, you will have more variety to your days. And then the second thing is you can get licensed fast. So if you can manage projects and if you know the whole process, it's going to be easier for you to kind of step in and step out of different phases of a project. So like you saw in my other slide, in school, you're only trained to do a very small portion of a full project. So you're only going to be useful for like schematics or design development part of a real project. So that's why the starting pay for a starting architect is so low. And when you get licensed, that's when you can go to like client meetings and manage the design and manage teams and, you know, coordinate with engineers. And it's just more fun that way. I mean, you can do all of these other things without getting licensed, but the client will have more, they'll just have more assurance in you if you're a licensed architect, and you will also have a good understanding of all of these processes. So that's another advantage to getting licensed. Oh, there we go. Now you can see the video. Sorry, I'm just trying to look at the comments and answer any questions if I can. Okay, so you wanted to see the last chart again? Which chart? This chart? Tom, you had a question. So, do I feel like school prepared me well for work? My program was a Bachelor of Architectural Science, so we did have a pretty good focus on like learning all the programs, and we did cover the basis of like building code and building details. But I think I just had a really hard time like, and we also learned about the construction processes, but I just had a really hard time like grasping all the concepts without actually doing the projects myself. So and it was just one course, so it was really hard for me to kind of gain the context of the entire within the entire project. So I think it did prepare me in terms of like with all the softwares that I had to use. And I think that is actually one of the big things that firms look at, just making sure that you can, they can give you a task and you can do it. But in terms of like being an architect and leading a project, I don't think that I was prepared for that at all. Can you talk about social life in school? Do you become really good friends with fellow architecture students, or do you get to socialize with other students? Oh, okay. That's a good question. Uh, I mostly had friends in the architecture program. Like, it was really, really, really hard to make friends with kids in other programs, just because like you're spending all day and all night in architecture, and I just felt a little bit like I wasn't able to like relate with students in other programs. But looking back, I kind of wish I had made more friends in other programs, because I think they can give you a different life perspective, and they can teach you things that are really important in life, that's not just architecture. Like when I finished my master's, I did my master's in Toronto, and I came back to Vancouver to work, and this is where I grew up. And so I kind of left behind my my architecture circle, and it was really hard. But I made new friends, and most of my friends here are in, like, I have a lot of architecture friends here too from work, but a lot of my friends here are like in finance or in real estate, in animation. And so I feel like well, first of all, I understood a lot of financial principles by having those friends. And I think that's one of the things that is really, really lacking in architecture school, and it's such a good fundamental to have in your life. And so I do kind of wish that I had made some of those friends a little bit earlier, so that I can start thinking about those other things earlier in life. Okay. Lisa, you asked, since projects are so prolonged in a firm, are there days or weeks where you don't do much work? No. There are no days where you don't do much work. I mean, no, that's not necessarily true. Yeah, like I think you have the really fast days and you do have the really slow days. And for me, the slow days, the time just passes so slow, because you're kind of like trying to figure out what to do. But those are also the days, like if you worked a lot the week before and another week is really slow, you can like, or all the firms that I've worked at, you could leave early on those days. So you can kind of like balance your time that way. So yeah, like we are gonna have a Q&A portion. So let me just get through all my slides and we can do a proper Q&A. But these questions are really interesting. Okay, so where was I? Monotony and school project. Okay, so the difference in scale of the projects, they also have an impact on how many people are going to be working on a project. So in school, typically it's like you and maybe your partner working on a project. And you might end up like that. And at work, you are going to be a part of a team. This was my old office. The red hair girl is me. And yeah, so at work, you're going to be a part of a team. You're going to be a part of a team within your office and also within like the larger scope of the project, where you're going to be working with a lot of different engineers, like different stakeholders. If you're working on institutional buildings, you're going to be working with builders, maybe interior designers. So it is a lot more fun, in my opinion. And I think if you like being a part of something that's bigger than yourself, then I think you will really like it. And if you like working with a variety of different people and if you like drama, you will like that too. Also, I think when you're starting a job, like collaboration and being able to work in a team is one of the most important qualities that firms look for. So I think it's a skill that's important to start like building up now if you're a student. Just being able to work with other people and, you know, just like being a good teammate. And then the next big difference is complexity of the project. Just gonna get some water. Okay, so in school, mostly you're figuring out the concept and the design. And you might figure out like the fundamentals of the structural system or the mechanical system. But you don't really need to figure out how to build it. And the cost is not really a concern. And at work, that is not true. Buildings are really, really complex. And these are construction drawings. So they're like blueprints. Do you guys know what they are? Construction drawings? Yeah, so a big chunk of your time is going to be spent creating construction drawings. They're basically like a set of really clear and detailed instructions for the contractors. Okay. And of course, because buildings are so complex, we work with a lot of engineers. And so I included this slide because I wanted to ask you guys if you think this is true or not. Okay, so I'm gonna explain to you why this overly simplified meme is absolutely not true. And I'm gonna explain it in legal terms and in terms of what we do. So engineers, they have their own specialization, like mechanical, civil, structural, electrical, and they're liable for the work that they do. And legally they have to stamp their drawings and say this is built to this standard, and I give my professional assurance. And architects, they have also their own specializations, which is fire safety and accessibility. That's like making sure that anyone, like older people or like people in wheelchairs, they can use the building just as well as any other person. And these standards vary from city to city. Vancouver is very, very strict with accessibility. So there's a lot more restrictions that you have to get through. And all of this is through the building code, of course. And in terms of what we do, while we are just like the engineers in that we have our own specialization, one of our main roles is working with these different engineers and the builder and kind of coordinating everyone. And this is actually a legal responsibility. It's called the CRP. And so what does that mean? This means that engineers, they don't really have to know anything about what architects do or what the other engineers do, but architects have to know a little bit about what each of the engineers do and what everyone else does. So, but you don't need to know it in too much detail. You just need to know like the basics of how these systems are going to have an impact on the function of the buildings. And typically you would like outline the spatial and functional criteria for the engineers, and they'll put together a design for you. And so I typically like work backwards. So you kind of start from how the person would use the space. So if it's like an office, they would want bright light, and maybe the client wants warm light. So you just try to think about like the aesthetics, the location of these fixtures, and the function of them. And also think about what the engineer might not be thinking about. So like a mechanical engineer, he's gonna, let's say he wants to put in a ventilation system in an office. He's not necessarily going to be thinking about how loud it's going to be. He just cares about the ventilation, right? So a part of your job is to try to think about all those other things. So yeah, that's a big part of your role. Coordinating the engineers and checking their drawings and making sure they work with the overall concept. And another very big difference from school is that you need to work with these scary people called contractors. And yeah, they typically come on board when the space is, all the construction drawings are done and the space is ready to be built. And this is the fun part of the project. And having a good relationship with your contractors and earning their respect is really, really important. Like you have to set standards and set expectations and establish rules at the beginning of the project, and that'll save you a lot of headache down the line because you're going to be working with these people all day, in and out, on some really complex problems. And a lot of contractors, they have a preconceived notion of architects as people who don't really know how to build. So it's really important that you learn your construction, learn your details, and know what you're drawing and how it's built. Especially if you're a female architect, actually. There's just going to be a lot of prejudice stacked up against you. So, if there's like one place to put your foot down and be assertive, it would be on the construction site. And you really want to know your stuff. And if somebody challenges you, you want to be firm and stand your ground. And yeah, I think having a good construction process is kind of an art of its own. And every office will have their own standards. And I might do a video on this and cover this on Mundane Mondays. Anyways, yeah, what I'm trying to say here is that like buildings and construction projects are really, really complex. So you kind of need to know a little bit about everything and be really good with working with other people. I'm gonna try to answer some questions. Jan Vincent Cruz. Would you say that the architect is the conductor of a project, or is that someone else's responsibility? Yes, I would definitely say that architects are sort of a conductor of a project, and I think more and more as buildings get more and more complex, we will see this role happening, this role becoming more important. Like if you compare buildings now to just like 30 or 40 years ago, we have so many new systems like building envelope systems, like waterproofing systems to make the buildings more energy efficient, that every specialization becomes like really complex. So you really need someone who's going to be a good coordinator and not only coordinate those systems, but be able to work with the city and the client to like manage expectations. And yeah, like I think that role is so important. And it's really the difference between like if a project's going to be good and kind of, well, every project is going to be pretty stressful, but you're the one who's going to be making it less stressful. Okay. Okay, gonna move on. So, yeah, the other difference would be, the other big difference would be the constraints. So in school you have the program, site, client, budget. Well, I don't know if you guys have a budget or not. Do you guys have a budget in your projects? I didn't when I was in school. So yeah, you would get like a hypothetical program, hypothetical site, hypothetical client. And I guess, yeah, typically no budget. And in real life, most projects have a specific budget and the time you need to work with. You have your fees, which is like the time that you're allotted to work on a particular project, and you have the construction budget. So this is how a lot of design decisions are made, and this is how like decisions like materials, cladding, the systems that you're going to be using, how you're going to decide all of that. And yeah, you kind of have to keep cost estimating as you go and try to adjust your design to the budget. I don't know if you guys know what value engineering is, but do you guys know? So it's like when you revise the design to make it more cost effective. And like we've had a value engineering exercise in pretty much every project that I've worked on, so it's very common. Apparently you can design down, but you can never design up, somebody told me. So you should always design to high quality, and once the value engineering comes in, you can design down. Yeah, and also you're going to have a lot of clients who's going to want to cut your ideas mostly on budget concerns. And yeah, so most of these aspects like program, site, budget, they're all given to you. Yeah, the program, sometimes in school you get to choose a program, but typically at work you don't get to. And you can kind of go as far as choosing the firm that you want to work for. So if you want to work on more residential buildings, you can go to a residential firm. But yeah, you typically don't get to choose a program unless you're involved in the pre-design phase, which would be cool. But anyways, like within that program, there is quite a bit of flexibility. And that's also kind of the fun part. Okay, so yeah, like one of the top requirements that you have to consider at work is the zoning requirements. Do you guys know what zoning is? Peter, you asked how you would calculate the cost while designing. So we actually work with a cost estimator. So there's a thing called like cost estimation A, cost estimation B, cost estimation C, cost estimation D. And like the D would be the most rough one. So you just calculate that based on like the rough square footage of your building, and you multiply that by if it's like an office, then there's a number for an office. And if it's like a residential, then residential with like wood frame construction, then there's a number for that. So that's like the most rough. That's cost estimate D. And then cost estimate C, it gets a little bit more specific into like what materials you're going to use, what kind of structure you're going to use. And then cost estimate B gets even more detailed into like the type of finishes that you're going to use. And it just keeps getting more and more specific. So you work with the cost estimator and you would kind of show that to the client. And if the client's like, whoa, that's way too expensive, then you kind of like work with them to reduce the design. And another thing that we typically do is we, like, let's say we're designing a cladding, right? And we have like 4 different cladding options. We have like something wood, something that's like metal, maybe zinc cladding, maybe concrete panels. And so this is a really strange part of the construction process, and I'm curious if other countries have it like that too. But at least here in Vancouver, like we have to call the manufacturer and ask them like, okay, how much is this going to cost? And they'll give you details about their products and they'll give you like a rough estimate. And there doesn't seem to be a, I don't know, like a universal database for these materials. So I always found that kind of inefficient. Anyways, so yeah, I hope that answered your question, Peter. Value engineering is removing trees, right? No, it's not. Yeah, value engineering Equals, yeah, client doesn't want to spend. That's true. Okay, so do you think it's harder to be accepted into a university? Okay, so I'll answer more of these questions later. If you guys can, yeah, like keep populating the chat with questions, but also if you can try to remember them for later so that I can answer them in the Q&A, that would be awesome. Okay, so did we talk about zoning? I don't know. Okay, anyway, so we have zoning requirements as well that we have to really consider. So most cities are divided into little zones. So you'll have like an industrial zone, a residential zone, like a commercial zone. And within that zone, you can have a variety of different buildings, but mostly you can only have the type that it's zoned for. So within those requirements, the city will say, oh, but you can have like 80% commercial retail. So that's your job as the architect to figure out what you're allowed to put in there. Read the zoning requirements because obviously you want the space to be as democratic and like good for the public as possible, but still meet the requirements from the clients. And we also have the building code requirements. So what I said before is architects are responsible for the fire safety and accessibility. So this is going to restrict what you can build and how you build it. So let's just say, for example, the zoning allows for 5,000 square feet of like commercial space in the building, and the client wants a big mezzanine, so we decide to split up that 5,000 square feet. Oh, you guys probably don't know feet. You guys probably work in meters. Okay. Square feet is a Canadian and it's like a North American form of measurement. But anyways, so let's say you take that 5,000 square feet into like a third. Like a third of that 5,000 square feet would be like 1,600. So let's say you and the client decided, okay, we want that to be the mezzanine. And the client wants to put in like 20 people on the mezzanine. So, you know, after doing some design work, you guys figured, okay, like 16,000 square feet is probably whatever, a good amount of floor space. But the building code, it only allows for a maximum of 1,000 square feet of mezzanine in that area because you need to have a maximum distance from any place in the space to the exit, so that in case there's a fire, people can quickly go outside and be safe. So that will be a constraint, and it'll get even trickier if the zoning says, okay, like within that 5,000 feet, square feet, you can only have 1/3 of that space as office, and the 2/3 has to be commercial. Then you just have to like work with the client to try to figure out like, okay, what use do we really want to have in the mezzanine? Like, can we bring some of those 20 people downstairs? Like, what do you want to do with the ground floor? How much it's gonna cost to construct the mezzanine? Is it even worth it now? And so, yeah, there's a lot of back and forth with the city and the client. And so you have to try to manage those expectations. And Yeah. So the zoning and the building code, it's kind of the basis for all design projects, unless you're kind of designing in the middle of nowhere. Okay. And then we also have to consider the public interest. So let's say you're designing this building in a mostly residential area, and you might get all these NIMBYs. If you don't know what NIMBYs are, it stands for not in my backyard. So it's these people who have houses in the area who are like, no, I don't want this thing here. Anyways, so here in Vancouver, there is a very extensive like public consultation process, which sometimes can get a little... Anyways, and yeah, like one time we had this project in this Chinatown neighborhood, and the building had white brick on the cladding. And the residents were like, no, we're not having that here. White means bad luck. And so we had to change the color of the cladding. And so, yeah, there is also that part of like trying to manage the public's interests as well. So, in the end, I think that's kind of the difference between a good architect and a bad architect. I hope you guys get this reference, because otherwise I will look like a fool. This is Walter White from Breaking Bad. He went from good to bad. Okay. Anyways, so yeah, the architect is trying to straddle all these different requirements of the code and zoning and site and the budget. And you're trying to create good architecture, and like you're trying to create something that's good for the public, while also satisfying the client's wishes. So like a bad architect will say like, oh, it is what it is, like that's what the code says, that's what the zoning says, because like the client doesn't know, the engineers don't know, the interior designers don't know, because they don't understand code and they don't understand zoning. So they usually just take the architect's word for it. And if the architect doesn't care and doesn't want to spend time like trying to figure out a better way to provide the client with what they want, you know, he can just say it is what it is, and the client will pretty much go with like what the architect says. And I think a good architect will try to like work and rework and just try to navigate around all these constraints to try to create a good scenario for everyone. Yeah, I think if you're a bad architect, you're really like doing a disservice to your client. And yeah, I also worked with an architect who was much older and much more experienced than me. And like, although it never said anything in the code or in the zoning, he just had so much experience that he kept saying like, oh, the city will never let us do this. I've tried this before. The city will never let us do this. And so everyone kind of takes his word for it because he has dealt with the city so many times. And you will kind of encounter this a lot. There's a lot of like unwritten rules that you just have to know by experience. And that's why even if you're licensed, like myself, I got licensed really early. Like you still need to work for so many years to be a good architect, right? Yeah. You just finished season 4. How lucky. I wish there were more seasons of Breaking Bad. uh, is it true that you cannot do anything else if you're in architecture school? Oh, I think for most people, they really get absorbed by architecture school. But when I look back on it, like those were really, I look back on those times very fondly because once you leave architecture school, you don't have that many opportunities to just focus on a project that you're interested in. So, yeah. And I mean, it's not necessarily true. Like, you can definitely manage your time to do other things. Like, I had a friend who was like going to the gym all the time and like making food and taking dance classes. So yeah, it's just based on how you manage your time, I think. Okay, and then the last big difference is the type of buildings you can work on. So, in school, you will be working on all different types of buildings, like residential, institutional, museums, libraries, maybe prisons, I don't know. And at work, you, each firm will be specializing in a particular building type, mostly. If you're like a small to mid-sized firm, and if you're a large firm like IBI or like Stantec, then you might be doing like all different types of buildings. But there is a pretty big distinction between like a couple of the main categories. So like a residential project is really, really different from an institutional project. And that's really different from a commercial or retail project. And that's also really different from an office project. So you don't really need to decide exactly like what type of buildings you want to work on, but it's good to try to develop some sort of a specialty, in my opinion, because I think it'll make you more valuable, and I think it'll also determine like your career path and your day-to-day and the type of clients you work with, because yeah, like if you're working on a institutional building, then you're gonna have multiple clients, you're gonna have a lot of different stakeholders. And if you're working on residential, then you're gonna probably just have the owners of the house, right? So a lot of people say that residential architecture is kind of like marriage counseling. But I think that's also that can also be very rewarding because you're providing a home for these people, right? Yeah, so typically, like the smaller the project, the more you can do it by yourself. I did mention this in one of my other videos. And this also means that you can finish the projects faster. So, and it probably means that you can be more involved in different phases of a project. And in a bigger project, you can kind of only do it in a firm. Like you can't really do it as a sole proprietor, or it would be really hard to without some help. Anyway, so it just means that you're going to be more of a coordinator or like a project manager. And it also means like you're going to be just overseeing a lot of moving pieces. Yeah. What else? Yeah, I think your interest in a particular typology is definitely important. I think you should try to think about that if you're in school now. But I think what you're interested in now, if you're in school, is also going to be really different from like once you try working on a different typology. Because you're going to see how it affects your day to day and like your interactions with the client. And yeah, I think after trying out a couple of different typologies, you can make a decision. So that is the end of the presentation. I hope I didn't crush anybody's dreams. I'm just trying to give you a realistic understanding of what it's like to work in the field. So, okay, so I'm gonna move on to the questions now. Lauren. What do you think will happen to architecture in the future? Do you think architects will be useful in the future? That is a really good question. Oh, hi, Stu. Stu's my friend from architecture school. Okay, so that's a good question. It's also a hard question. So in the future, I think technology is going to advance, and I mean, technology is going to advance in a way that like how Revit changed the industry, right? Like you're not just doing 2D drawings, you're building the 3D model, and at the same time that's building your construction drawings, and everything is integrated together. So I think in the future, these building technologies and design technologies are going to be far more advanced. And so I think the value of the architect is not going to be so much on like being able to draw or like put together details. I think the value of the architect is really going to be more like their soft skills, like we talked about before, like navigating the zoning and code and navigating through everyone's expectations. And that those soft skills are hard. Like that requires empathy, that requires like listening skills, it requires having sensitivity to the context and strategic thinking. So like look at the pandemic. Like we've lost a lot of jobs, and a lot of jobs have become automated, and we're seeing that the jobs that are not automated, the jobs that will stay are the ones that require like a human touch, right? So yeah, that's what I think is going to happen in the future. And I think buildings are also going to advance in the future, although like the architecture industry does seem to move a lot slower compared to others. I think buildings are going to become much more complex. So in the near future, I think we're going to see more more specializations popping up. And I think people who can manage those little areas are going to become successful. And I also made a little video on my channel called Deep Work. That book really changed my thinking on like how I should be developing my skills. And yeah, like the book is saying that it's people who can learn new technologies really fast and adapt to it really fast are going to be better off in the future. So yeah, you guys should actually start thinking about this now. Like the industry, if you're in school, like the industry is not going to be the same when you start working than when it is now, right? So don't just like take my word for it. I think you should think about how the industry is going to change in the future. And yeah. Next question. Mallory McCormick. Okay. To be honest, how do you like working with interior designers? I actually love working with interior designers. And I really enjoy working with them because I felt like there was a lot that I could learn from them. Like, they are not really dealing with all the constraints like the building code and the zoning, right? So they really have to sell to the clients like a feeling, which is, I think, a lot harder to sell than something that's based on such pragmatic constraints. So they have like amazing client management skills and a really good skills in like selling their ideas, which I think a lot of architects could improve on. So yeah, I really enjoyed working with them. Like sometimes it does get a little bit frustrating when they don't like understand all the code aspects of a project, but I mean, those are minor details and those are things that you can help them with. Is handwriting going to be obsolete? I don't know. I think most of our work we do with computers, but there is something really nice about seeing a really nicely handwritten note. I'm not gonna lie. What softwares are most important to learn as architecture students or young architects? I think personally Revit, but since I got my new MacBook, I haven't been able to install Revit on here, so I have been trying out like ArchiCAD and Vectorworks, and it does seem like, I don't know, like half of the firms here in Vancouver use Vectorworks and the other half use Revit. I think Revit is definitely more popular, but like there's a lot more little finicky details, and learning Revit is a big learning curve. However, I think Revit can still give you the best like competitive advantage when you're applying to firms. And apparently if you know Dynamo, that's Dynamo is kind of like Grasshopper for Revit. So apparently that's really useful as well. That's something that someone who works at Stantec told me. Do you feel like the specialization of architecture has diminished the role of architect to just specialists? That's a really interesting question. I think there are actually two paths that you can go in architecture. And yeah, one of them is being a specialist at a larger firm because they can typically afford to pay for someone to just do CA or just do detailing. And I think there is a lot of value in that too. And I think there are people who can, who really thrive off of that and enjoy that. And then I think the other way to go is being a generalist, which is something that I'm really trying to do. I am trying to become more generalist. Like I have my T, right? Like I want to build up knowledge in all the other things, but I do want to have some specialties. Like I want to get really good at passive house. I want to get really good at like communication and communicating to clients. But I think, like, personally, I enjoy doing a bunch of different things. Like, I don't think I could be in a very monotonous environment for a very long time. So, yeah, that's just my take on it. Oh my god. I realized. I realized that my egg salad was on the screen. Sorry, guys. Yeah, I did make egg salad today. It was okay. It wasn't that good. My mom's recipe for egg salad was much better because she added cucumber, and this one only had onions in it, so it was okay. Okay. What at work? That's interesting. Okay, so what at work still inspires you to be an architect? I think for me, oh, sorry, was it what at work still inspires you to be a great architect? I think for me, it's actually just that. Like, I like growing, I like learning. I think there is an intrinsic happiness you can gain from like becoming better at something and like pushing yourself to be the best you can be. And I'm, like I said, I'm trying to become more of a generalist, so I'm building up my soft skills and all my technical skills at the same time, while also focusing on areas like like communication and passive house. And then I'm also inspired by like educating younger people. So I think architecture is a really humbling experience in that you understand that it's not really a one-man show. When I was in school, I used to have a big ego. Like, I used to think that, oh, I'm this super creative genius that can design these like really cool things. But now I know that no matter how good of an architect I am, I'm only going to be making a tiny little difference in the world. But like teaching and like trying to inspire the next generation, I feel like can make a bigger impact, like within the industry and also in the world. And also I want to try making good, like socially and environmentally sustainable architecture. That's also culturally significant. And also just like working with different people and like building meaningful relationships and helping people create something that they feel like they were a part of. And yeah, just like being a part of something that's bigger than myself. So yeah, I think those are some of the things that inspire me. Okay, so next question. How to choose architecture firm to apply for first internship? That is a great question. So I think there's like three parts to this question. Like, yeah, like there's the application. How do I get a job? And then there's like, maybe I should also talk about how can you be a good architect once you or sorry, how can you become like a valuable member of the firm once you start working. So yeah, you can basically prepare yourself. You should, if you haven't already and you're in school, like you should basically just start putting together a portfolio now. Like look at other portfolio examples online and like get a sense of which ones are good and which ones are bad. And like just try to have good projects, like good clear graphics, because yeah, like when you start working, that's going to be your department, like graphics. And that's well, that is what you're really good at right out of school, right? So graphics, imagery, renderings, diagramming, and make sure your portfolio is clear and concise. And softwares, that's, yeah, like try to get your hands on or try to practice as many softwares as possible. I heard somebody say like Revit is not a good program to learn, but maybe you can elaborate on that. Okay, and then yeah, just like teamwork. I think if you have like one or two team projects, that kind of shows that you can work in a team and work with other people. And if you can have a project that's like multidisciplinary, like I did a project with building science students, and that was a part of my portfolio, and that was something that they really liked seeing. So yeah, something like that is good. If you have any like extracurriculars, that's really good too. If you were a part of the student council, that looks pretty good, and that's something that has come up quite a few times, like during my interviews. And also like network, try to get awards, try to get referrals from your profs. That's important. And yeah, like if you can get a summer internship, that's good. And yeah, that'll look good on your resume, and it'll also like increase your starting salary if you can get internships between the summers in school. Yeah. And I guess, yeah, I guess when you first start applying, like, I guess once you finish school, you're going to be applying for like all kinds of jobs. But I would also urge you to think about, like, seriously think about where you want to work, because a bigger firm is not necessarily better if it's your first job. And a higher salary isn't necessarily better either. So I think you should be thinking about things like, are you going to be working closely with the principals? Are you going to be like, is the firm going to help you get licensed fast? So that's really important, because once you get licensed, you can get a salary bump. Like I had a $20,000 salary bump after I got licensed, and that was at a different firm. So that's really important to consider. So you might be taking a lower pay at your first job, but if they're going to help you in your career, I think that's more important than yeah, going to a bigger firm for a bigger pay. Okay. Currently, so there was a question, what building types are you working on currently? So I have mostly worked on TIs, like commercial retail tenant improvements, so like retrofits and renovation. I've done offices, residential buildings, but I haven't really worked on a lot of institutional buildings. So I'm actually between jobs right now. I'm starting my new job next week, and there will be a much bigger focus on institutional projects. So I'm excited about that. How hard is it to find an internship? Do you think it's possible to find one in third year, or would it be better to put efforts to finding year 4 internships? I don't really know what the market is like right now with the pandemic, but I would just try to find an internship. And when you say internship, you mean like working between the summers, between like third and fourth year, right? So yeah, I would just try to find work whenever you can. Like, but if you don't, it's not a huge problem. Like, I never worked between the summers. I was like at the at the beach or like traveling, but I was still able to get a job after I finished. But there is a salary difference. Like, if you worked between the summers, like, you will have a higher starting pay when you start like officially working. Do I have a personal favorite piece of architecture? I really like Carlos Scarpa's work. Like, he's a really master manipulator of space. I love Stephen Hull's work. I don't know if you guys know Stephen Hull. He's amazing at like playing with light. I also like Carlos Scarpa's work. I don't know if you guys know him. He actually never built like a full building, but he's done a bunch of renovations in Venice. And he embeds a lot of like symbolism and meaning into his work. And because they're all in very small, tiny little spaces in Venice. They're all like really detailed and just really beautiful spaces to go through. I also like, like if we're just talking architects, I also really like Bjarke Ingels. Like, I just really like how he combines like different typologies, and he's like a master communicator. So I think he's really cool. What do you think your strengths are? What do you think your best strengths are as an architect? Or what part of the process do you enjoy the most? From Robert. I think, well, I kind of mentioned this at the beginning of the presentation. Like, I always thought my best strength was designing. Like, I love designing, and I've always just identified myself as a designer. But I think after working, I realized I really love the construction process, and I actually love like the construction administration side of the project, because that's where like a lot of things are happening at the same time, right? And that's when you're actually like building the building. You're getting to see the thing that you drew get built. And there's a lot more interactions, and there's a lot of like problem solving. Like, if there's something that is that the contractor doesn't know how to build properly on site, then he'll send you questions, and you kind of like try to figure it out, and you send back answers, and it's like a back and forth. And I just really like that process. So yeah, I think that's my favorite. And also I love like researching and like creating programmatic diagrams, and also I love like presenting work and trying to create presentations that are really easy and understandable to like non-architects. So I think that's something that I'm gonna try to work on, and it's something that like my new firm and I are gonna actively try to work on, because we are doing a lot of projects right now in the pre-design to like schematic to feasibility phase, so like the early stages. So there's a lot more like diagramming and like communication that needs to happen. So yeah, that's the part that I'm trying to focus a little bit more on right now. How in school and university would you know if you're gonna like architecture if you haven't studied architecture before, and whether it'll be a good fit? It's from Andrea. So that's a lot of talking. So for me, so I'm assuming you are in high school, or you're in another program thinking of going into architecture. So this is just my experience, and I didn't know anything about architecture before I went into architecture school. And I didn't even know that I was gonna like architecture. I was in grade 12. I was supposed to choose a major, and I used to paint a lot. Like I used to stay after school and paint these like delicate oil paintings. And like one of the student teachers, not even a teacher, she like recommended, she was like, oh, why don't you try out for architecture school? Like, why don't you try putting together a portfolio? And so I did that, and I got into a program in Toronto, and I wanted to try living in Toronto, so I went there, and I ended up really liking architecture. And so I think I think you won't really know until you try it, really. You can ask 100 different questions, and people are going to give you all different types of answers, but I think in the end, it's something that you kind of have to try. And even once you are already in architecture, there's a lot of people who like fall out of love with it, and there's a lot of people who weren't that into it before who like really fall into love with it after they start working, because they realize, oh, like I actually like doing this part of architecture. So it's kind of a constant discovery process. Okay. You guys have a lot of questions, and I'm just trying to answer them like from the top. I guess I'm kind of starting in the middle. How can you improve your design skills? My teacher always tells me that my designs are really bad or really basic. Okay. Oh. I think you just improve by practicing and doing a lot of different iterations. I think iteration is key. Like, typically, and this might actually cover some of the other questions, like some of the other design questions. So, my design process for school was I would just do a lot of research about all the different constraints. Like, I would research the site, I would research everything about the views, the program, the context, and just like fill my head with research, do a shitload of research. And I just like sketch out a lot of like programming diagrams in my sketchbook. And for some projects, the concept comes out kind of naturally. And it's, I think once you kind of get a handle on the concept, then you can improve your design, because if you have a good concept, then you're like every aspect of your design is going to be fed by your concept, right? So if you have a concept that aligns with the structure, the program, and like the function and the form of the building, then that's like what's considered a good design. And so yeah, like you want to try to like get the concept out as early as possible. And like, I don't know, some people like create a concept and then they just like build off of that. But I think for me, it's the best when you just like let the concept come out of the research, and let the concept come out of the initial sketches that you're doing. And then I usually try to let the function kind of drive the form. So I do a lot of like diagrams, a lot of like formal diagrams, and I just try to think about the functions of the space, and I just do like 100 different iterations of how that would look in massing. So just like do 100 different iterations of like the same thing on Rhino or SketchUp or whatever 3D program you're using. And I actually got a really good book recently. Never mind, I can't find it. But yeah, I'll put the link to the book in the details of the video. But yeah, it just gives you different strategies to do massing. Here it is. It is called Conditional Design, an Introduction to Elemental Architecture. And so it has all of these strategies on how you can iterate through different massing options. So like if you want to merge these two forms, it shows you how to merge it on this plane, and it also shows you how to merge it vertically. And it also like shows you how to integrate circulation. So let's say this is overlap. It's trying to show you how you can create like an overlapping condition between amongst like two different masses. And so it shows you that you can do it like this and like this. And if you're overlapping it on top of this geometry, you can insert the circulation in this way or this way. I don't know, it just gives you a lot of options. And yeah, it's a good book. Okay. Did I answer your question? You said, how do you do designs? Yeah, so I just do a lot of iterations. And yeah, sometimes the concept comes out later, and sometimes like as you're in the more developed phases of the project, you have to change the design because you realize like the concept that you have you found out later is way better. So yeah, that's why architects work long days and long nights. Okay, so I think so that was an hour and 40 minutes. So I think I'm gonna start wrapping it up. I know that I didn't answer like so many questions, but maybe I'll do another live session. Oh, there's my Excel again. Maybe I'll do another live session where I just answer the questions. I think that will be a good one. So yeah, that's pretty much it. If you guys have any other questions, like just throw it in the comments. I think the chat will be off after this. And yeah, like thank you so much guys for joining. This was really, really cool, like really fun. And hopefully I'll do this again soon. And is there anything else to add? I hope you guys found this helpful. And I'm gonna go through all the comments and the questions later. So yeah, have a great rest of your Friday or Saturday. And I'm gonna go and grab some dinner. Okay, cool. Bye.